The Maid's Secret. Lena had always been a woman of quiet resolve. She was used to the endless hours of cleaning, cooking, and caring for the household. Working as a maid in a wealthy household in the city, she had seen and heard things that she could never truly escape. But none of that compared to the burden she carried when the offer was made. It began innocently enough, one late evening, when her employers, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, asked her to stay after hours. The couple, were into their 40s, had been trying desperately for years to have a child, but had failed repeatedly. They had spent a fortune on fertility treatments, but nothing had worked. Mrs. Thompson, once a lively and beautiful woman, had become consumed by the disappointment. Her once vibrant personality had faded, leaving behind only a shell of who she once was. "Lena," he began, his tone tentative. "We need to discuss something important. It's a delicate matter." Lena, wiping her hands on a dish towel, stopped in her tracks. She had worked for the Thompsons for nearly 5 years, and she had always been a quiet observer of their private lives. But nothing had prepared her for what would come next. Mrs. Thompson, looking weary and fragile, sat at the kitchen table. She was clutching a glass of water in her hands, but her eyes were full of something Lena couldn't place, desperation, perhaps, or fear. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson," Lena said, her voice respectful yet filled with confusion, "what is it? You know I'm happy to help in any way I can." Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat and spoke, her voice fragile. "Lena, we've been trying for years to have a baby, but we can't. We thought maybe you could carry our child for us. We know it's a big request, but we would be so grateful. We will compensate you generously for your time and effort. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." Lena's heart began to race, her mind struggling to process what they were asking. The Thompsons were kind to her, yes, but this was something completely out of the realm of normality. She had heard of surrogacy before, of course, but she never imagined it would be asked of her. I don't know," Lena stammered. "I mean, I've never done anything like this before. I don't know if I can." "We will take care of everything," Mrs. Thompson reassured her. "You wouldn't have to worry about any medical expenses, and we would make sure your life here stays the same. All we need is for you to carry the child for us. Once the baby is born, we'll take it, and you can go back to your life, as if nothing ever happened." Lena swallowed hard, her thoughts in turmoil. She had seen the pain in Mrs. Thompson's eyes. She had heard the stories of their failed attempts to conceive. And yet, something in her gut told her that agreeing to this would forever change the course of her life. But the Thompsons were offering a life-changing amount of money, enough to pay off her debts, enough to ensure her family would never want for anything again. It seemed like an impossible decision, yet there was no way she could turn them down. They were her employers, and they had been kind to her over the years. The thought of helping them, of giving them the child they had always wanted, tugged at her heart. "I'll do it," she said quietly, almost surprised at the words that escaped her lips. Months passed, and Lena's pregnancy progressed without incident. The Thompsons were attentive, ensuring she had everything she needed, even if there were moments of awkwardness between them. But as her due date approached, Lena began to feel a growing unease in the pit of her stomach. She had agreed to this, but she was not prepared for how deep the attachment to the baby had grown. She watched as Mrs. Thompson eagerly prepared for the baby's arrival. The nursery was painted, baby clothes were folded neatly, and the entire house was filled with excitement. But Lena couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The baby had begun to kick, to move, and she felt a bond form, an undeniable connection. This was not just a child she was carrying for someone else. This was a life she was helping to bring into the world. When the baby was finally born, a healthy boy, Mrs. Thompson's joy knew no bounds. She held the child in her arms, tears of happiness streaming down her face as Mr. Thompson stood proudly by her side. But when it was time for Lena to leave, they made it clear that the arrangement they had made was over. The child was theirs now, and Lena was to leave the house and forget about everything. "We've paid you generously," Mr. Thompson said, his tone final. "You'll have everything you need. Just go, Lena. You can start over." She couldn't do it. The thought of leaving her son behind was unbearable. How could she forget about him? How could she walk away from the child who had become a part of her? In a moment of desperation, Lina made a decision that would forever alter the course of her life. She would not leave the baby behind. She would take him, no matter the cost. But she needed a plan. Late that night, when the Thompsons were asleep, Lina crept into the kitchen, where she found the bottle of sleeping pills they had given her to help her rest. She crushed them into a powder and mixed them into the milk that was meant for the baby. She would make the baby fall asleep, and then she would take him. But before she could carry out her plan, she was caught. Mr. Thompson had woken up, sensing something was wrong. He found Lina standing by the crib, holding the bottle, her hands trembling. "Lina," he shouted, rushing toward her. "What are you doing?" Lina turned, her eyes wide with fear. She had been caught. She had been foolish. Before she could explain herself, the police were called, and she was arrested for attempting to harm the child. As she sat in the interrogation room, Lina's heart shattered. She had only wanted to protect the baby, to keep him, to give him the love she knew he deserved. But now, everything was lost. She would never see him again. The Thompsons had their child, and she had nothing but the broken remnants of a dream that had been torn away too soon. And in the end, the maid who had agreed to help was left with nothing but regret, a prison sentence, and the haunting memory of a child she could never forget.